So for me, thinking through about what we've been doing on the private sector development agenda, how the bank has supported that agenda, what has worked, what hasn't worked, is extremely important. Why? First, of course, for Africa to accelerate its growth, we need more private sector investment, more private sector activity, less state. And so the bank plays a key role in that agenda. If you look at what our shareholders expect for us, and as you may know, we're having a big meeting tomorrow on our general capital increase. So as an organization, we need to step up. We need to do much more on the private sector side, much more to support the private sector in Africa. And to do that effectively, it's really important for us to learn from what we've done so far in the past, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what we can build on, and what we should change. If you look at what we've done on private sector, probably the most important kind of work stream, or certainly the largest volume of lending, has gone through lines of credits to commercial banks that we use to then on-lend to private company SMEs, but also larger companies in regional member countries. And so I think a lot of the learnings from the evaluation relate to that stream of work, this on-lending work to the financial sector. And so here some of the lessons are that in the end, the banks we work with, the financial intermediaries we work with are banks. They're commercial enterprises, and their business is lending. Their business is not development impact or monitoring and evaluation. So when we work with them, there's quite a bit of work to be done to help them not just in lending in a proper targeted way that meets the objectives of the specific line of credit we may have with them, but also to help them develop systems to track what the impact of that lending is, which is definitely not something that comes naturally to commercial banks. So that's one important part, is like how do we clarify the objectives of these lines of credit so that we're clear as to what we want to achieve, not simply volumes of lending, but what is the impact we want to achieve. How do we help these banks monitor that impact? And then in many cases, to actually achieve impact, it will also require that we provide technical assistance to the financial intermediary or to the end beneficiary to really ensure that the money is catalytic and generates the impacts we are aiming for. So all those are kind of embedded in the lessons from evaluations, and all those are areas where we need to focus much more on. That's just one example. There are other lessons, of course. So to me, the big thing is that we need to go beyond. So we need to keep involved in this intermediary lending and reach the private sectors through these channels. We need to keep working on, and as a matter of fact, if you look at our lending trajectory, the share of real sector lending, where we lend directly to private companies in the real sectors, not in the financial sector, is increasing as a share of the total. So these are good trends. But lending is not enough, and that is part of the lessons that we learned from these, the broader evaluation of private sector development. We also have a role to play in policy dialogue, in helping countries improve their overall business environment, or more specifically, the environment, the regulations for the sector in which we're active. So if we're active in the energy sector, well, not just doing financing IPPs, but also working on energy sector regulation, on tariff systems, on effective reform of the incumbent utility. So all these things, just by way of example, having a more upstream approach to support our downstream private sector investment. So more work on the enabling environment, more work on sector policies. That's what we should be doing. Relative to other organizations, we are not yet resourced the way we should be, and I certainly hope that our board will be a bit more generous in terms of resourcing these type of functions. Other organizations, if you look at the World Bank Group, for example, rely heavily on trust funds from donors. Donors are not as generous with us, and so maybe we can encourage them to support us also in developing this more upstream private sector development, policy, dialogue, sector reform kind of agenda, which is critical to generate the maximum impact from private sector development.